Nothing like a good hot cup of cocoa to get in the mood for the holidays. James here, back with another episode on the Throwback Afternoon channel, breaking down my top 10 Christmas movies, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So, if you seen my last video, we covered the 80s. Top 10 Christmas movies of the 80s. So, on today's episode, we're going to be doing the 90s. We're talking, I was born in 91. This was my prime era, right? Prime childhood era. 91 all the way up through 99. Just some of the best Christmas movies. And a lot of iconic ones, a lot of big ones. And this list is going to be hectically controversial. I know I'm going to upset a lot of people with this list, so without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10. My list here is a little cut off. Number 10, I have Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. Now, this was an animated film that I'm pretty sure went straight to DVD or straight to TV. It was a made-for-TV movie that a lot of people probably haven't even ever heard of. But for some reason, we had this on VHS. I still remember the VHS cover. I have it on DVD now. Did I say DVD earlier? Yeah, straight to VHS. I don't know why I keep saying straight to DVD on these. They didn't have DVDs back then. It was a straight to VHS movie. I do have the DVD copy of it that I just got a couple years back, but I still remember the VHS covers clear as day. And like it's just one of those classics to me. It's one of those ones that maybe to everybody else may not be as influential or as huge or memorable, but for me it was. Watched it a lot as a kid. Had a lot of silly kind of but fun songs. And I don't know, it's just a weird cartoon. There's a lot of quotes from it that me and my brother would quote growing up and still quote from time to time. So yeah, number 10, Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. Where we at? 9. Another lesser known one that I grew up with and had the VHS, now have the DVD. All Dogs Christmas Carol. Now, this was the third movie in the All Dogs Go to Heaven series. So the first one came out in the 80s, I'm pretty sure, and starred Burt Reynolds. I don't know why I just went blank. Burt Reynolds, the late great Burt Reynolds as Charlie, and you had, and now I'm going to forget his name too. I can picture his face, which is weird because he's known for voice acting. But he voiced Itchy. If you know who I'm talking about, then you'll know, and you call me out, and I'll put it down here when I look it up and do the research. But it was a Don Bluth film, Don Bluth Company. Very big in the 80s and 90s for doing animated movies, a lot of childhood movies. So then the second movie was All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, which switched out Burt Reynolds for Charlie Sheen, and was actually probably one of my favorites, I think, because the second one I'm pretty sure came out in the 90s, and it featured a kid who I'm pretty sure the kid in that, his name was James. So that was one of those things where, you know, as a kid, like when you see another kid about your age, around your age or a little bit older, whatever, and they have the same name as you and anything, like James and the Giant Peach, when I was growing up, I was convinced that was me. Even though nothing to do with my real life, nothing, but it's just, I don't know if anybody else has that same kind of like, that does that, where when you see that as a kid or did that, when you're like, oh man, this is me, this is my movie right here. But that was one of them. And so anyhow, the third one came out, and it's basically a Christmas Carol, but told through the All Dogs Go to Heaven universe. Okay, guys, so next up is going to be my number 8, and this is where it's going to get really controversial, really controversial, really fast. My number 8 is Home Alone, the first Home Alone movie. Hear me out. I do love the Home Alone movies. I know for a lot of people that's like a top tier Christmas movie. And I like the first Home Alone. I do. But it's not my favorite Home Alone. It's definitely not my favorite Home Alone that came out in the 90s. And because of that, that's why it's a little bit lower on the list. but it is still a classic, and it does still deserve its spot on the list. It's just not the one I'm more familiar with, or the one that I'm more have more nostalgia and attachment to. Number 7 is going to be Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas. Now, this was the Disney thing they did. It was a movie where it was broken up into like 3 stories. You had 3 different Christmas stories all in one movie. Kind of like an anthology, I guess, of sorts. You had the Gift of the Magi, which was the Mickey and Minnie one, where he was trying to find the perfect present for her, and she was trying to find the perfect present for him, and hijinks ensue. But that one, it's one of my favorite stories. It's based on the actual The Gift of the Magi, which is just such a good story, such a sweet, just such a good one. And then there is the one where Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Donald's nephews, wishes it was Christmas every day, and the classic trope, being careful what you wish for. Great, really good, really fun, kind of good little lessons in there. And then the one that's also really sweet is the one with Goofy and Max, where he's trying to prove that Santa Claus is real, and trying to be the best dad. And again, as a parent, you rewatch something like that, and it gets me. It's so much different than when I was a kid. When as a kid, the one you kind of cling to. It's funny with Once Upon a Christmas, the different stages. So as a kid, the Huey, Dewey, and Louie one was like the go-to, right? You wish it was Christmas every day. And then we got a little older, and I got married. When I first got married to my wife, obviously the Gift of the Magi, that trying to find the perfect Christmas gift and worrying about this, that, and the other, and really just wanting to get that perfect thing for your perfect soulmate. And then as an adult now, as a parent, as a father, you watch the Goofy one, and you're like, you just want to preserve that magic in your kid's eyes and heart for as long as you can. So yeah, so then moving on. Okay, so up next on my 90s Christmas movies, my number 6 is going to be Miracle on 34th Street. Now, this is a remake of an older version of the movie, black and white movie. Came out, I don't know what year, came out a while back. But this one, particularly in the 90s, it came out in 1994. Had Mara Wilson from Matilda, and you had, I'm going blank on his name already. But it's the same guy. It's Attenborough. It's either Richard or David Attenborough. I'm going to get a lot of hate in the comments. I think it's Richard Attenborough, who played John Hammond. I'm struggling today, guys. Come on, it's Monday. It's a Monday when I'm recording this. Wednesday when you'll be watching it. But yeah, so it had Mara Wilson from Matilda. It had, I believe his name is Richard Attenborough, not to be confused with David Attenborough, or maybe I'm getting them reversed. Either way, played John Hammond in Jurassic Park movie. And in this, he plays Santa Claus. And again, to me, this movie is just one of the all-time greats. Again, it goes up there in the Christmassy, just hits you with that feeling. It's just such a sweet, warm-hearted movie. I don't know what else to say. It's got the court case in it is really good. A lot of the other supporting cast in it are great, fantastic. But yeah, ultimately, it's just him and Mara Wilson just absolutely steal the show, and there's so much heart and warmth and magic to it. I love it. So number 5 is Jingle All the Way. This is one that I grew up with a lot, rewatching every year. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sinbad, trying to get the toy for their kid, Turbo Man. It's Turbo time. I mean, come on, it's classic. It's that classic, especially now that I'm a parent myself. As a parent myself, you kind of look at it from a different point of view than when you was a kid. But even as a kid, like, I just knew this movie was hilarious. It was filled with so many like good quotable lines. Again, a good movie, is one you can quote for days and any time of the year. Yeah, so I don't know what else to say. Jingle All the Way, man, it's great. Features a cameo by The Big Show. What's more 90s than that? Big Show dressed as Santa Claus, WWE wrestler dressed as a Santa Claus in like suspenders. Come on, and I believe it was John Belushi or Jim Belushi. Sorry, Jim Belushi. If Jim Belushi's in it, it's just so good. Number 4 is a little bit of another controversial one. I know, but it is "I'll Be Home for Christmas." This was starring Jonathan Taylor Thomas. It is a live action Christmas movie. Also had Jessica Biel, a young Jessica Biel, in it. Um, I think it's the two biggest names. I think Gary Cole is in it. If any Office Space fans out there, yeah, that'd be great. But no, it's a movie where he is constantly like shrugging off going home for Christmas to his family and stuff, and he's wanting to go to the beach with his girlfriend, which is Jessica Biel at the time, and she's wanting to go home to her family, and then but then he ends up finding his dad promises him the car. He can have the really nice sports car they've been working on if he comes home for Christmas this year. He has to bribe him to get him home. And so he suddenly changed of heart, and he's like, "Oh, we'll go home for Christmas." And obviously, then he ends up getting, you know, Desert Santa Tumbleweed. You know, if you know, you know, or Buzzard Santa Tumbleweed. So it's just, again, for me, it's one of those ones I grew up watching every year. I was a big Jonathan Taylor Thomas fan as a kid growing up. Like, he was one of my favorite actors as a kid. You know, as a kid, you don't really know actors by names as well, or you're not as familiar with, at least for me, as I am now. You know, I'm a big movie buff, a big cinephile, and I know it. Like, I can see a movie and I'm like, oh, that's so and so. Oh, that's so and so. As a kid, I didn't really have that. I just knew the characters, right? Except for Jonathan Taylor Thomas, because I knew that was Simba. I knew he was the guy from Wild America. I knew that he was from Home Improvement. Like, he was just I wanted to be him so bad. That's who I wanted to be the most like. Like, that's who I wanted to try to emulate and be like, was Jonathan Taylor Thomas, because I thought he was the coolest. So yeah, so it's a great movie, endlessly quotable. Again, me and my wife quote it all the time. We watch it every year. The character Nolan, which is one of the characters he runs into out on the road while he's traveling home, is so good. One of our favorites. That's my number 4. Number 3, and here's where I told you guys it would come back around full circle. Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. I love both the Home Alone movies, I do, and both came out in the 90s. I actually didn't know this until I was researching. I thought the first one came out in the 80s, but apparently they both came out in the 90s. Being a movie buff, and I was a theater kid growing up, so I always had like this magic for New York. I didn't get to go to New York. I did eventually get to go when I was in high school, and it was still great. And, you know, obviously, as an adult, you kind of, you know, I know that it's not quite as magical as all the movies make it out to be. Certain parts of it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. When we went on that field trip, you know, I went my senior year in 2010. I got to go. And there is still a lot of magic to it, especially from a theater kid, a Broadway kid, and a movie buff. But again, it's just something about it as a kid. They really painted New York as a magical place. And especially in that second movie, and he was at the hotel, and he got to go to the big toy department, and he had the pizza. Just something about the second one. I don't know. It just gets me more. And to me, it feels more Christmassy. The scene at the end of Home Alone 2, spoilers for Home Alone 2 if you've not seen the Home Alone movies, and Home Alone 1, I guess. At the end of the second one, when he reunites with his mom, to me, always kind of got to me and was more emotional and more impactful than at the ending of the first one. And they're right whenever at the end of the second one, they're right there in front of the Rockefeller Plaza and the big, huge tree, the big Christmas tree. And so, yeah, to me, it gets me every time. It's one of my all-time favorites. That's why, me personally, I like it better than the first one. It is just the setting of it. I just really like the setting better. But yeah, that's just me. Number 2 is The Santa Claus with Tim Allen. This one, again, is one of those top tier upper echelons. If you would have asked me as a kid what my favorite, most watched all-time Christmas movie was, it would have been The Santa Claus. I watched this movie. We had the VHS. I'm pretty sure it had a white case, slipcase VHS tape. And we watched it every single year, probably multiple times a year. I love this movie. To me, it is one of those movies that can instantly put me back in that Christmas mood, no matter what time of day, what time of year. it's just so classically Christmas and so magical and warm. And again, it's another one of those ones where when you watch it at different stages in life, it affects you differently. And so our daughter just turned a year old this year, and rewatching the Santa Claus this year as an adult, and some of the scenes, with him with his son, it hits hard, man. It hits you differently when you're thinking about your kids, but it's still just magical and warm. And Tim Allen, he slays it. Um, and that brings me to my number one 90s Christmas movie, which is The Muppets Christmas Carol. Now, again, there's many, many versions of Christmas Carol out there, but I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this in saying that the Muppets one is my favorite. It's by far the best. Um, it's just so good. I don't know how to explain it. I'm a Muppets fan anyways. Don't get me wrong. I am a huge Muppets fan. But I feel like even if you're not a Muppets fan, this version of the Christmas Carol is so good. And I want to say Michael Caine in this movie, for it to be a Muppets movie, and every time we watch it every year. Every time we watch it, I ask my wife, I'm like, Michael Caine is in a Muppets movie. He's like the only human actor in this movie. I think there might have been one or two other human actors in this movie. For the most part, he's like the only human actor in this movie, and he gives an absolute Oscar-winning performance. I've watched the Oscars. I've watched award-winning movies. I've seen a lot of these really high drama movies, and Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge, to me, is an Oscar-winning performance. Like, it's an award-winning performance. Let's put it that way. He just gives it everything, dude, and he leaves it all on the table. He puts his whole heart into this role, and you feel it. And even like the Muppets, the whole Heaven Gonzo, which is my favorite Muppet, by the way, and Rizzo, his ever partner in crime, playing the whole like Charles Dickens, and he's like telling the story. It's just so good. The music is great. It's so catchy. It's so like just I don't know. There's not enough words or time to go into this, but number one 90s Christmas movie is Muppets Christmas Carol. So that is my list of my top 10 90s Christmas movies. Next up, we're going to be tackling my top 10 2000s Christmas movies. That's from 2000 to 2009. So yeah, look for that video. And if you haven't watched it yet, go back and watch my top 10 80s Christmas movies. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share. And remember, you're my number one customer.